It's Tuesday the 5th of January. Will Spurs overcome a Vardy-less Leicester within the space of 3 days? Will e-Spurs be able to broadcast from 4 different time zones at one time? And will it be lucky for Spurs when the year ends in 6? This is your e-Spurs podcast.
And just those celebrations against Watford, if you ever wanted to see a more unified fan base and more unified squad in general, it's just, you have to pinch yourself. It's the most exciting time to be a Spurs fan I can remember in years.
But there's certainly more of a team effort, and I think, you know, that durability that is in this side is the best that I've known for a long, long time.
If I can answer the question you asked to Jace, I think we've got to be title contenders without any shadow of a doubt. 4 points off the top halfway through the season. The only thing that might count against us it will be, you know, being in Europe, and we've got the FA Cup to come. But just let us dream. Go on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs!
Welcome to the podcast, guys. A very happy new year to you all. Don't forget, we want you guys out there to get in touch and stay in touch with the show. So if you like what you hear, there's multiple ways to stay in touch with all things e-Spurs, as we always say. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at @e_Spurs. Loads of stuff goes up on there every single day. On Facebook, which is facebook.com/e-Spurs page, all one word. And new for this season, you can follow us on both Google Plus and YouTube. For all of the links for the e-Spurs platforms, just go to our website, which is www.espurs.blogspot.co.uk. Tonight, we've got a podcast that's so jam full of Spurs-related chat that we may well have to go into added on time ourselves. On tonight's show, we'll be chatting to a few Tottenham fans who love their new team so much they set up their own supporters club. We'll review a valuable point on Merseyside at the weekend, getting your reaction to this week's topic in our new Talking Point feature. Plus, we'll be rounding up the latest rumours from the Tottenham transfer merry-go-round. And, he says, if we get time, we'll take a look at the Leicester doubleheader in the Premier League and FA Cup. Takes a breath. What a show we've got planned for you tonight, guys. Absolutely jam-packed, as I say. But without further ado, first up, let's introduce the panel of Spurs fans without whom we couldn't do this show. It's our very own team. It's Jason, John and Ricky. How you doing, fellas?
All good, mate.
Very well, thanks, mate.
Very well, thank you, Andy.
Great stuff, lads. Good to speak to you again, as always. But that's not it for tonight. We are also joined, as I said at the top of the show, by a couple of lads who are new to supporting Spurs relatively, but nonetheless as dedicated as the rest of us. And they are, I'm pleased to introduce from the USA, it's Andrew and Brendan. How you doing, lads?
Doing well, thanks. I'm doing great.
Great stuff, guys. Good to have you on. Now, just for everybody listening out there, guys, we've been talking for a couple of weeks on Twitter now about coming on to the show. We've finally been able to arrange to get you guys on. Just for everybody out there, I mentioned you're new to supporting Spurs. Let's go to Andrew first up. If you could just explain for us how you came to supporting Spurs and why you chose Spurs.
So I started watching soccer pretty heavily about 6 years ago, the year before the 2010 World Cup. And the first season, I sort of really got into it because in the US, the games are broadcast in the morning, and there isn't very much other options in the way of sports on Saturday and Sunday mornings. So the first season, I just watched as many games as possible. I didn't really pick a team, and I sort of narrowed it down. And that was the season when Spurs qualified for the Champions League, Peter Crouch's goal at Man City. Really exciting stuff. And most people I knew over here in the States who did have a team, it wasn't as big over here as it is now. They supported either United, Arsenal, Chelsea, or Liverpool, as they were the big four teams who had finished in the top four of the previous 5 or 6 seasons. And the thing that really excited me with Spurs is no matter who especially that first season when Spurs were in the Champions League, they had some really exciting players, Bale, Modric, Van der Vaart. They were the type of team where they could come from 2-0 down to win at the Emirates, beat AC Milan in the San Siro, beat the European champions at home, but also that season they only took 1 point against West Ham, who finished last, or they lost to Blackpool, or 4-0 to Fulham in the FA Cup. So the fact that every single game that Spurs play, and it's the same way now, it hangs in the balance no matter who the opponent is. Really excites me about Spurs.
Fantastic. And Brendan, I know yourself and Andrew have been buddies for a while now. Just explain to everybody a bit about this supporters group that you set up out there.
Yeah, so we met. I'm currently a sophomore at Harvard, and Andrew's a freshman. And we met through the Harvard Sports Analysis Club that we are both members of. It's using analytics, statistics, and sports, that kind of thing. And we met through that and realized that we both were Spurs supporters. So we started with our friend Robbie. We started watching all the games together. This started this year. So yeah, it's been great. I haven't really found many Spurs supporters to watch games with before, and it really makes it a lot more fun when you're watching with your friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people who also care.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to, hear from you guys flying the flag over there. We were speaking before the show. It's always makes you proud, to hear people who've actually chosen to support Spurs rather than maybe being born into it from just down the road. You guys have actually picked Spurs and are flying the flag over there, guys. So it's fantastic to hear from you. Just very quickly, if you can, favourite moment since you've been supporting Spurs?
For me, probably Chelsea on New Year's last year, and I would guess that's the same for Andrew too.
Yeah, I actually lived in London last year, and I went to around 20 matches, including that New Year's Day match. So that would have been my obvious pick. I mean, other ones would be, personally for me, being in the away end at QPR last year when Kane went around Rob Green, and also coming back from 2-0 down at Arsenal in what was my first North London derby.
Oh,
so
great memories, lads. I'm sure there are people out there listening from the States. If there's anybody listening from around about the Harvard area or would like to get in touch with you guys, maybe join up with you guys for a match, how can they do that, guys?
Well, we have our Twitter page, Harvard_Spurs. We're slowly building a group of followers. I think we're up to around 150 now, which is exciting. We try and tweet funny/nerdy related things, as we are the Harvard Spurs, obviously. We're trying to get over to Boston Spurs, but sometimes on Saturday and Sunday mornings, especially as college students, it's difficult to muster the energy to take the T over into downtown Boston. But yeah, I mean, there's a fourth member who often has track practices during matches, so he's unable to watch with us. But yeah, I mean, definitely if you want to get in touch with us, just send us a message or tweet at us on Twitter. It's Harvard_Spurs.
Nice. I mean, it's great, lads. Listen, it's great to have you on, and great to have you guys so enthusiastic about Spurs. So welcome to the show, guys, and let's get into some Spurs chat, shall we? Lads, the weekend, I think, personally, a very good draw against Everton, a hard-earned point. There were comments, weren't there, on Twitter that maybe we'd blown the chance of all 3 points. We should have won the game in the first half. Personally, I look at it in the bigger picture, if you like, in that look at how far we've come. In that sense, 7 points from Christmas isn't too bad at all, is it? So let's get the lads' views on this one. Let's go to Jace first of all, mate. Was it a good point for you or 2 lost?
I think certainly at half-time, I don't think anybody can understand how we weren't completely in front of the game at half-time, because it was probably the best half of football we've had for a long, long time. We were dominant, inventive up front, good in midfield. We looked as solid as anything when the ball went into our half. The 2 balls that hit the post and the bar, you just thought it was a really dominant display, and you just knew, I suppose, Aaron Lennon. When did Aaron Lennon ever score a goal like that for us?
Had to be, didn't it?
I mean, it had to be him, didn't it? And funnily enough, when Dele wasn't starting, you thought, yep, this is a good sign, because he was one I was worried about. And so at half-time, thank God that Dele Alli scored, because if we'd have gone in at half-time behind, you'd just been shaking your head, wouldn't you? But the second half, we probably didn't do enough to, we didn't really force Howard into too many saves after the game, after half-time. And probably in the end, Everton was starting to come at us in the last 10, 15 minutes. So, but it's now what, it's the ninth draw, and we can't keep saying it's a good point, it's a good point, it's a good point, because at the end of the day, they're as good a side as they are. They're still in the bottom half of the table, and we've still dominated 45 minutes of the game and actually had large control of the second half as well.
Yeah, Ricky, I mean, Dele Alli again, fantastic performance. More league goals now than any other teenager, I think, in the top 5 leagues, which just goes to show the impact this guy's having on the season already. I think I saw an interesting stat at the weekend that said that he's already scored more goals this season than Wiltshire has in his entire career at Arsenal, which was lovely to read. But I mean, he wasn't the only one, was he? There were some other standout performers in the game. Lamela had a great game. Who for you was the pick of the bunch in this one?
Yeah, I just have to say quickly on Dele Alli. I mean, many people have said it over the weekend. That feeling when we signed Bale, and many said we've got a player there. Well, I can tell you right now, in Dele Alli, we've certainly got a player there. That goal, just an absolutely superb finish. One player I do want to pick out from the weekend is Toby Alderweireld. I know we've been speaking about him a lot over the recent weeks, but I thought him and Jan, in terms of controlling Lukaku, did a super job. Obviously, Lukaku did have that build-up to Lennon's goal, but apart from that, they didn't really give him a sniff. There hasn't been too many centre-backs down the years that you can think of that could play that kind of ball, what Alderweireld played over the top to Dele Alli for the goal. Yeah. Just a phenomenal finish. And again, like you said there, Andy, I think Lamela had another good game. I think his work rate, again, can't be questioned. I thought he was absolutely superb. I thought Davis had a super game at left-back, and for me at the moment, well warrants having that left-back spot. I know many are saying maybe Rose should have come back in, but for me, I think Pochettino's philosophy is that if you're doing well in the team, then why should you lose your place? And that, for me, is the reason why Davis is there. He's been very solid at left-back. He was very unlucky not to score with a cracking shot that come off the bar. But I think Davis, what he does do is he actually improves our defence, and I think Vertonghen looks better as a defender when Davis is there, because I think with Rose being left back, and I have said this before, I think that kind of isolates Vertonghen slightly, because Rose does love to bomb forward, and therefore that does leave him slightly isolated. But listen, we've got that lovely dilemma to having two decent fullbacks that can interchange when needs be. But on the game itself, I thought we played very well. That first half for me was sheer domination from Spurs. Probably one of the best first half performances we've had under Pochettino. I just can't say how much I'm just enjoying watching that type of football, that brand of football we were playing, the interchanging of passing, the movement. And I just think at half time, I think Martinez knew that I think he was quite embarrassed to be going in at 1-1, because we just dominated that game. And I don't think Everton could play any worse. And that's why second half you did see them come out and, play slightly better. And I think as horrible as annoying it is to say, a point is probably a fair result on reflection, and we go away a tinge disappointed. But that's where we are now in terms of where we are in the league, that we're going away and the point against Everton, we're looking on reflection thinking could have been free.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Roberto Martinez, as you pointed out there, said after the game that Spurs were the best team to have played against Everton this season, even though they've lost against Manchester United 3-0, etc., etc. He put us up there with the best. John, just how, bearing in mind the domination of the first half, just how do you end up 1-0 down in that game?
Well, I think it's just one of them where, they had nothing for 20 minutes, got one chance and took it. I mean, if the post was a little bit wider, if it had a little less paint on it, we would have been one up from Harry's shot. And it's just one of them where it just proves how brutal the Premier League can be, really. I mean, it's all well and good dominating, but if you don't put the ball in the onion bag, then you end up with nothing to show for it. I think, like Ricky said, it's one of them where, to be fair, at the end, I would have thought, yeah, all right, it was a point gained, I think. And like as Jason said, we have had too many draws, but a lot of them have felt like big drop points, like where we really should have come away with 3. But even though we did dominate the first half, I still think that it was a good point on Sunday. And just like to point out as well that the stat of Aaron Lennon scoring a goal and Spurs never losing is still intact.
Yeah, nice stat there, mate. Nice stat. It's it had to be him, didn't it? It just had to be him.
Well, like Jay said, when he never scored a worldie like that for us.
No, I can remember him scoring a few tap-ins, but never a. Although, didn't he score? Do you remember, Jace, that goal against was it Chelsea at the Lane? He scored little bit similar
Yeah,
to that one where he curled it.
That was probably his best ever goal, but I mean, certainly when it fell to him on Sunday, and you thought he's going to shoot, I was thought, oh, good, go on, let him shoot, and oh no, he's put it away.
Yeah.
It's just, gutting.
Yeah, you expected it to end up somewhere by the corner flag, didn't you? But
yeah.
But alas, no. Brendan, on Twitter, as I mentioned before the chat there's been a bit of a mixed reaction to this one. A few Spurs fans saying we should be winning this game. You know, we shouldn't be celebrating a draw. What side of the fence do you sit on that one? Do you think we should be more positive about this result?
Yeah, I think a draw is fine. I think we could have easily come away with 3 points through that one, but I think when you look at the season as a whole, and if you're going through the fixtures at the beginning of the season and picking out which games you need to get 3 points from and which ones you're okay with a draw, I think even though Everton are dropping in the table a little bit, what are they, 11th or something like that now, I think you still say away at Everton, a draw is probably a good result. Keeps us in the top 4 by 3 points, I think. And now there's some of the teams, Leicester, we've got that coming up, but I think some of the other teams below us also have a pretty tough schedule. So I think it's a pretty good result. I think a win could have easily happened, but I think I'm relatively satisfied.
Yeah, and Andrew, 7 points from 9 over the Christmas period. That's not to be sniffed at, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's as Brendan said, if you looked at it before the 3 fixtures were played, if you take 7 points, that would definitely, most people would bite your hand off for it. But I do want to say about the game, the first half was amazing, as everyone before me has pointed out. But I've noticed sort of this season that if in close games where Spurs have been on top, the ones that come to mind are Villa, Arsenal, West Brom, and Newcastle, and also on Sunday against Everton, where close games, 1-goal games, our pressing style sort of peters out towards the end of games, and we look less and less likely to score as games go on. I know we scored the late winner at Watford, but that was against 10 men. So while there are times where we're winning the ball back in amazing positions, the work rate is incredible, sometimes I feel like we can't sustain that for 90 minutes. And I felt on Sunday, the last 15 minutes, Everton were pretty much on top of us, and they were more likely to score in the last 15 minutes, even though Spurs should have been 3 or 4 gone before then. Yeah. So that's just something to think about watching going forward.
Absolutely. I'm sure every single Spurs fan out there in the second half could sense Everton were about to score if the half was to go on much longer, because, after all, we're Spurs, and that's what usually happens. But having said that, I mean, you've got the likes of Lukaku, Jace, who was pretty much non-existent throughout the game thanks to the defenders. Yeah,
we said in the preview last week that was going to be probably the key battles of the 2 Belgian boys against Lukaku, but it's that disappointment, I suppose, that that they are a bottom half side, Everton, as good a side as we may think, and we've now played them twice and only picked up 2 points. So at some stage you've got to do more, haven't you, when you're on top in a game? We kept saying it on watching the game live, that we've had so much of the game, but you've got to score when you're on top, because otherwise it comes back to haunt you. And I think over the 2 games with Everton, we've had by far the best of the 90 minutes in each of them, and yet we've not won either of the games, which is the disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it compared to the start of the season, when we pretty much wrote off Spurs' chances of finishing in the top 4, didn't we? I guess I'm kind of looking at it in that light, if you like, and that's where I'm sort of saying to myself, well, maybe a point's not too bad. But I also get exactly where you're coming from, Jace, in that we need to be. Everton aren't a good side. Let's look at it realistically. Apart from maybe Lukaku and Baines, overall they're not a great side, so we should be beating them.
And as I said, Stoke have gone there and scored 4, and Leicester have gone there and scored 3, and Man United have gone there and scored 3. And Bournemouth scored 3 against them. So that shows you that you can get at Everton, and that's the disappointment. That was so dominant that first half, and yet we're unable to take full advantage at the top end of the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were dominant, Rick, but in this game, Harry Kane was apart from the moment in the first half where he hit the post, he was pretty quiet in this one.
Yeah, I have to say, boys, though, in fairness to Everton, I thought they defended very, very well. As much as domination we had, I think Everton, Martinez did comment that they defensively, they definitely shored up. But yeah, just on your point on Kane there, I think really he did have a bit of a quiet game, but still his work rate can't be questioned throughout the game. He still runs the channels for you. He'll run all day, but I think the issue we've got is come the hour mark, he looked absolutely knackered. And that's where we've spoken about, obviously, in terms of the window, us trying to bring in someone else just to kind of take the pressure off Kane, because...
Sorry, Rick, to Kane, can I, just before I lose my train of thought, there was comment on the game itself that Kane looked tired, as you mentioned there. How, bearing in mind he's only played 2 games in 7 days, and we're only, halfway through the season, how can you explain what is now one of England's main centre-forwards being tired?
No, listen, I get that point, Andy, but the problem is the work rate Pochettino demands of the players. You know, I think, like you say, if you look at the stats, the Spurs players in general run more than any other players in the league. And if he's not doing it on the pitch, I'm sure he's doing it in terms of the training. It's still quite high intensity. So the issue you've got with Kane is, listen, if you want that high pressing game like the lads have commented on in terms of the first half performance, it is hard to sustain that for a full 90 minutes. And the issue you've got with Kane, like a lot of our players, is when you do reach that kind of 60th, 70th minute, we're suffering burnout. And that's when you need the options from the bench to come on and be game changers. And at the moment, in all honesty, apart from the Son goal against Watford in the last minute, we haven't got too many game changers on there. Eriksen, for me, another massive important player to Spurs. Again, very, very quiet on the weekend. We need players coming to the fore at the moment. Dele Alli has been absolutely superb this season. But this is what my concern is. Like the lads have alluded to, it is a 9th draw this season. And, you know, some of the draws, yeah, they've turned out to be good points. Some of them, they're points we've thrown away. But again, for me, it all comes down to this window. How much do we want to finish 4th? How much do we want to have a serious tilt of this title, because we're only 6 points off the top. 6 points is nothing, as we've seen this season. Arsenal still got to come to Spurs. Arsenal's fixtures on paper, if you look at the games they've got to go to away, they've got to go to a lot of away games in terms of the top half teams. So it depends what our ambitions are in terms of what we want to do in the window. I know January's not the best time to bring players in, but my answer to you about Kane is that you can't rely on one striker all season. Irregardless of whether he's going to be tired or at some point he picks up an injury, you've got to have a backup option there. And we haven't got a recognised second striker. And Pochettino has got no choice but to continue using Kane and to look for alternatives on the bench. And at the moment, game changer wise, we just haven't got enough there.
Yeah, it was interesting, isn't it? Just hearing you talk there, thinking about the players that we brought in the summer, in the likes of Son and G. We were told, weren't we, that they were also going to be used as centre forwards, if you like. And although we've seen them off and on in some of the cup games, he doesn't trust them, does he? He doesn't seem to trust them to replace Kane in the bigger games, if you like. And it seems crucial that we get somebody in. We mentioned last week, didn't we, that we hope they did their business early. Haven't done any so far, although the window's just opened, so there's still plenty of time for that. But we wait and see. I just want to go back to Dele Alli, John. We mentioned the great form that he's in. 18 games he's played so far this season, 23 chances, created 5 goals, 4 assists, 77% pass accuracy. Have we in Dele Alli got another Bale on our hands here?
There's a question. That's a bit of a statement as well, Andy. He's definitely started his Spurs career a lot better than Gareth Bale did. But again, it's hard to tell really. Will he become an £80 million player? It's possible. He's definitely got all the tools and the attributes to become a great player. I don't know really. With Bale, obviously his start at Spurs was terrible. It took him 3 seasons probably to do anything really remarkable in a Spurs shirt. And we never saw it coming, did we? I think maybe with Dele Alli, obviously his potential from the start's a bit more obvious. But, the way that the world is at the minute and the transfer market, who knows? I just hope that we managed to keep him for... I know Bale was there 6 years, but I really only count 3 of them seasons as good ones. So let's hope we managed to get more than 3 good seasons out of him. But you never know. I just hope that we... no matter how much people think he's worth, I just hope he stays at Tottenham for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, amen to that. And I tell you what I like about him. He's got a bit of fire in his belly, isn't he, Dele Alli? He's got that fight in him.
He certainly has. Yeah, he's another one, a bit like Lamella. Well, I know I used the analogy of David Ginola and Scott Parker love child last week. He's a little bit like that, where he's got that nastiness to him. at the Norwich game, Boxing Day, I was in the Park Lane end and I see him grab hold of, was it Russell Martin by the throat? And he's just think, he's got to tone it down a little bit. Like the booking he got against West Ham, for example, was a bit of a silly one. It didn't really need to happen. As long as he can remain controlled, like English football had this problem. Well, Wayne Rooney was the last one, really, you'd say. People kept saying he's too aggressive, he needs to tone it down. And I believe, really, since Wayne Rooney has calmed down on the pitch, his performances have been, the last 5 years probably, he's been nowhere near the player he was. So I don't want him to completely lose that sort of bite and aggression. But as long as it remains controlled, I'm all for it, for sure. If he's playing for the shirt, and us fans love to see that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I really do think we've got a special player on our hands. The games that I've seen him, pretty much every game this season, barring a few in the league, he's been named man of the match, hasn't he? And that's some going, considering he's just joined the club. He's a teenager still.
Yeah.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. And every single match now you watch as a Spurs fan in the UK, and I'm sure overseas also, they're talking about him after the game. They're putting stats up on the screen. The only concern, I guess, would be that they don't big him up too much and alert the likes of those clubs we shall not mention overseas.
Well, we've seen it before, haven't we? So many times where, I don't know if you see it on Sky Sports today, but Ray Wilkins picked his England team to play in the Euros, and he had 4 of our players in there. He had Walker, Dyer, Kane, and he had Dele as well. And you think, if the wider footballing public are definitely taking notice of him now, it's not like he's just one of them where we know he's good, but he's sort of like a hidden secret. He's definitely out there now, and the whole, like you say, the world is beginning to know the name Dele Alli, and it's just hope that, like I said, I just hope we keep him for a long time and he carries on as he is, because he could be. I don't like likening him to players of rival clubs really, but he's just like one of them sort of Frankie Lampard kind of players where he's a box-to-box player, he scores, and he's always involved as well. That's what I like about him.
Yeah. Like
with Eriksen, like we were saying, if he's not scoring or assisting, he's probably not doing too much else.
Yeah.
Whereas with Dele Alli, it's a bit different than that. He's got so many strings to his bow, and it's frightening really at 19 how good he is already. By the time he's 23, 24, he really could be, one of the best, couldn't he? Let's hope he's like I said, he stays at Spurs forever.
I think, and I say this hoping that it proves to be true, I really do genuinely believe that he could become our Steven Gerrard. We've all heard Steven Gerrard already say that Dele Alli is better than he was at his age. It's just fantastic. And look, I mentioned earlier that we're concerned about other clubs having spotted him. Well, I think we'd all rather have good players in our side than not, wouldn't we? So that's something I guess you just have to put up with. But it's fantastic.
Well, exactly. I mean, let's just hope that Zinedine Zidane doesn't watch too much Premier League football.
I mean, to be honest with you, it's all looking in that midfield area with the likes of Dyer. We've got potentially England's future midfield, haven't we, in there? So it's looking good. Andrew, we mentioned Christian Eriksen. What have you made of his performances so far this season?
I don't know. He seems to be a bit off the pace a little bit. I was sort of amongst Brendan and Robbie sort of advocating that he should be dropped. And I thought it was a good decision to drop him against Watford. Sometimes he looks very good and other times he sort of goes absent for 15, 20 minutes at a time. But on the other hand, his set pieces have still been amazing. We've scored a ton of goals off of corners. His 2 free kick goals against Swansea were excellent. So I'm not 100% sure what to make about Eriksen. Maybe he just needs a rest. Maybe he needs to sit a couple of games to keep him motivated, because it seemed, especially last season after he went that run of games where he scored a lot of goals, the 2 goals he scored against Sheffield United in the League Cup semi-final, he sort of was immune to criticism from the fans.
Yeah.
And the second half of the season, I don't think he scored a single goal after West Brom, which was right after the Sheffield United game, and people didn't really take notice of it because he had done so many amazing things for us in the first half of the season. So maybe a dropping would possibly do him good, sort of how we've dropped players in the past and they've come back even stronger, like Dembele barely played last year, Lamela barely played last year, and they've both been excellent this season. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how that shakes out going forward. But I think a couple of games off would do him a world of good, and I think we have the cover to handle that. I mean, Chadley's a great player who's sort of gone anonymous, same because other players have done really well in his absence. Bentaleb and Mason too. So I think Eriksen can do with a couple of games off, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, any sort of competition is healthy, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've especially seen that with the left back, right back situation this season, where we, with the obvious exception of Harry Kane up top, we have a lot of adequate cover for our positions. Where, I mean, say we go with a completely second 11 against Leicester in the Cup this weekend, which I don't advocate doing, but if Pochettino wants to do that, there's a really strong core of players that can come in and do a really good job for us. And I think depth-wise, we have 2 players at every position except for striker, which is a very, very glaring hole, as we touched upon earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come on to the Cup later on in the show, but in terms of the team we put out there, if we were to put out a second-string side, I, for one, would certainly not be happy with that. I'm sure Jace wouldn't either. We've spoken about the Cups before in the past and how important they are to Spurs. So I think I agree with you, Andrew, completely. I think, it's important we put out a strong side, but it's also important to give the likes of Eriksen a bit of a wake-up call in some sense. Don't get me wrong, he's been fantastic for the club, Christian Eriksen, and we can only thank him for that. But he also, everybody from time to time needs a bit of a nudge in the right direction sometimes. And I think dropping him, for goodness sakes, we've got the likes of Bentaleb on the bench. You've got other midfielders in there bursting at the seams to come in. So it's almost a perfect time to do that, maybe after the Leicester games, if you like. See how that goes and then give him a rest. Brendan, in terms of the forward 5 that we've got some great attacking talent in there. I saw at the weekend a few people debating whether or not Dele Alli was better suited further upfield, just behind the striker, or as a central midfielder, if you like, alongside Eric Dyer. Where do you think we see the best of Dele Alli?
I think he's best in kind of a number 10 role. I think the numbers show that he has 5 goals and 3 assists or something like that on the season. I think that the issue there is going back to Christian Eriksen, is that I don't think Christian Eriksen is nearly as effective when you play him on the wing. And trying to fit those 2 into the number 10 role. I mean, I guess you could play kind of a 4-3-3 with Eriksen and Alli both playing as kind of number 8s, I guess. I think Dele Alli is an attacking midfielder. He's a box-to-box guy. He can maintain possession and move it along. I guess I don't know what's happening in training, but I would like to see kind of a 5-man midfield with Alli and Eriksen in number 8 roles with I guess you'd put Lamela on the right, Kane, and then Chadley or Son or whoever else you have on the left. And you still have Dembele when he gets back too. But I would like to see maybe experimenting with the formation a little bit so you can get both Alli and Eriksen into those forward roles that I think they're really best in. Because I think that's been part of why Eriksen has struggled a little bit too. Yeah,
I agree. I think, we're yet to get him in his best position. We saw it from time to time a couple of seasons ago. He's occasionally moved more central, and he seems to get involved in the games a lot more. I was also at the Norwich game with John, and on the other side of the ground, and almost at times just seems as if Eriksen's a half a yard off the pace. There's balls that he doesn't stretch properly to reach. He doesn't. I can't put my finger on it, but he just doesn't get involved in the games as much as he once did. Whether or not that be down to tiredness, again, we've mentioned Kane there. Who knows? It's just, he could be potentially that next level player that pushes Spurs up to higher heights, couldn't he? It's just we really need him at this time of the season to come good. Although, having said that, as you guys have mentioned, he's done it so often for us in the past. We're going to move on to the next section of the show, which is, of course, the e-Spurs talking point. This is our new feature on e-Spurs. Each week on our social media, we put out a question for you guys out there to get involved and send in your responses via our e-Spurs Twitter account at @e_Spurs or on the Facebook. Just use the hashtag eSpursTP. That's eSpurs talking point if you leave a reply. Last week, we were set a question by Ricky. If you could make one realistic signing this window, who would it be and why? With the important word being realistic. So we got loads and loads of responses once again. So thanks to everybody who's taken part in this week. Let's go first up to Jace. Jace, you got some responses for us?
Yeah, we got from Caterham 7 at Georgia USA Spur. Berahino, I suppose. We lacked for pace up front and he already knows Kane. Should be cheap and West Brom went rid of him. Poch can sort him out. We've got at Me Crazy Matt, Rico Henry, the young striker from Basel, and Loic Remy. Low risk, all of them. Remy is a proven Premier League striker. Although I must admit, Rico Henry's a new name on me. Ollie Wadhams at Ollie THFC, been saying it for ages, but Alex Witsel would be brilliant for us.
And Alex Witsel was another one that was linked today, wasn't he, guys, in the media from Zenit. So that's certainly one that's quite topical at the moment. Rick, what have
Get
you
our
got?
Belgian boys on the case.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Because you think he'd fit straight in. So that's one potential option there. Rick, what have you got for us, mate?
Yep, so I've got SB18 at Dele Boss Alli, who says Berahino because he knows Kane well from the England under-21s. If not, Jose Perez of Newcastle. That's another new name. We've got Michael Lewis Dowrow at Arch Poet Doro, who says, call me crazy, but I wouldn't mind if we brought back Defoe. Class striker that wouldn't mind coming off the bench for Harry. And finally, we've got Matt Ford at MattFord87, who says, Berahino. Genuinely, Poch would keep him grounded and get the best out of him. Maybe Sandro from Barca as well.
Yeah, Sandro's another one that we spoke about, didn't we, on last week's show. Defoe, putting it out there, we spoke about a couple of weeks ago as being one of the great Spurs players, but I'm not sure if you might need a Zimmer frame if we bring him back at the moment. And there's others in there that are completely... It's silly season, isn't it? So you're always going to get those names that just pop up out of nowhere that just completely smack you in the face from nowhere. It's John, what have you got?
First of all, we've got Jordan Soloff at Jordan Soloff 9. Berahino, although he may be a controversial character, he has proved he can score goals in the Premier League and will be a good addition. Saracen at Infidel Saracen. A striker is a no-brainer, but also want a defensive central midfielder. If Dyer is suspended or injured or just off the boil, we have no cover, which is a fair point. And where my good mate Ollie has mentioned there, Axel Witsel, we definitely cover that one. We've got Grant Priest at I am Gary 25. Yannick Bolasie or Jason Punchin, as Andros Townsend will probably be off. Just on Townsend, it looks like he's keeping his fitness up for the 21s. Played against United for the 21s again yesterday. It looks like he's just keeping fit to get a move, doesn't it? I think he's probably going to go. And we've got our own Jason at e-Spurs Thailand. Realistically, Berahino. Can't see any chance of Mahrez, Igalo, etc. Sneaky bid for Remy would be worthwhile.
Yeah, see, I mean, Berahino we spoke about on last week's show, didn't we? And the pros and cons of signing him. Andrew, what do you make of Berahino? Do you think he'd be a good signing at Spurs?
I thought over the summer he would have been a great signing, and we were after him pretty heavily. He scored lots of goals last year for West Brom. But Pochettino sort of has this philosophy where the players really have to buy in and be committed 100%. I mean, we've seen Aaron Lennon go. We're about to see Andros Townsend go. And we saw a bunch of guys cleared out of last summer for having bad attitudes. And it's been pretty much proven that Berahino this season, playing as a second striker, as he would at Spurs, he'd clearly be playing behind Harry Kane. He has some sort of an attitude problem, and I don't think someone like that would be able to fit in and mix well with the players, given that he's basically gone on strike at West Brom and he can't seem to get a game. Playing behind Rondon as he would behind Kane at Spurs. I know Spurs are slightly a better club, but I think it's too big of a risk, especially if West Brom are asking for the kind of money they did over the summer.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's another one that sort of divides fans a little bit. Even though he hasn't even arrived yet, he's already dividing the fans. Jace, again, we spoke about Berahino, didn't we, last week, and whether or not his attitude should affect him coming to Spurs. Are you still of the thinking that it's worth a punt?
Yeah, for me, because, as I said, I'd look at his attitude and say, the boy wants to play for Tottenham and believes he should be at Tottenham. And I think, the other thing I think he's left out of West Brom a lot for is because Pulis doesn't really, it's not a traditional Tony Pulis type striker, is he? In just the same way you'd probably think in an ideal world, Sam Allardyce wouldn't really want Jermaine Defoe there. And I think Pulis knows that Berahino probably isn't as committed to West Brom and then thinks, I think part of that problem with Berahino there is down to Tony Pulis and West Brom as much as it's down to Berahino.
Yeah, Andrew, just turning this one on its head slightly, do you think, looking at it from the outside, that Pochettino could be the guy who tames, if you like, Berahino?
I'm not sure. He came in and basically booted a bunch of players that have had players like Adebayor, I should have mentioned him earlier, who have been in and out of various situations. And I just worry that if Berahino comes to Spurs and gets a long run of games without playing, say because Harry Kane's in great form or we don't have too much fixture congestion, that he could sort of go the same way. And he might think, oh, this isn't what I signed up for. And, I mean, if someone has a proven attitude problem, we have a manager who shows zero tolerance towards towards players with attitude problems, I just don't see how, if he seems to be an expensive option when we could go after cheaper options that are younger. I mean, Berahino's very young too, but players like Sandro, as we mentioned, I know the other Moussa Dembele has been heavily linked in this window, and he's very young, scoring goals for a team that isn't doing particularly well in the championship. And as we just showed with Dele Alli and hopefully Alex Pritchard going forward, players that are very young are schooled with the English style of play and are willing to go 100% for the team. And I'm not 100% sold on Berahino being able to do that.
Really, really interesting we say, the guy hasn't even joined Spurs yet and he's already encouraging opinions from Spurs fans. It's really interesting to hear. Brendan, apart from the striker option, which we all, I think, agree needs addressing during this window, are there any other areas of the team you think need improving?
I think another defensive midfielder cover for Dyer. I think Dyer's doing a fantastic job, but I get a little worried that what if he goes down? I don't know that we really have many people that can step into that role. We have central midfielders, but they're not of the defensive breed that Dyer is. But beyond that, I guess we have cover at center back, we have cover at fullback. I think my thoughts is that this will happen, is that we'll go out and get a second striker and a second defensive midfielder.
Yeah, it looks that way, doesn't it? I think striker almost certainly. Ricky, could you argue maybe that Bentaleb could come in and cover in that area should he be needed?
I'm not sure, Andy, on that, only because Bentaleb is not a central defensive midfielder. But my concern is with the recent links with with Alex Witsel, is that what you don't want to do is bring in an established central defensive midfielder that's going to hinder the development of Dyer. Again, you're in that same position with Kane, where the player you're bringing in has to kind of accept that he's going to be on the bench or going to be a backup to either, to Dyer, and that's the issue you've got. I can't see Spurs moving for Alex Witsel. That's the name being linked at the moment today, and it was linked the last window. I just purely can't see it because I don't think Pochettino would put any risk to harm in the development of Dyer, who we've seen this season has come on leaps and bounds. But on your point in terms of who can cover us in the squad, it's difficult because Dembele, you saw having Dembele, Dyer and Alli is the three, that really does work so well. The balance is so good. I suppose you could argue that Dembele possibly could cover that defensive midfield role, but then obviously you're losing him in terms of his midfield capabilities going forward and holding on to the ball. It is very, very hard. Again, I personally think you maybe have to look to bring someone in, but at the same time, you have to try and find someone that is happy enough to be a backup to Dyer. And that's obviously where Pochettino has that dilemma. Your only risk, obviously, is the worry that, if Dyer does get injured and you don't bring someone in, then you are looking, like you say, in terms of the Masons, the Bentalebs, the Dembeles to cover you. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, it certainly is. I tell you, the only reason that I wouldn't expect to see any midfielders come in, and that would be the fact that Pochettino was happy to bring on Onoma in the 88th minute the other day. He seems to really want to get him involved in the team. You've got the likes of Tom Carroll, Bentaleb, who isn't even getting in the team. Dembele's to come back. We're so overloaded in that area, aren't we? Especially with youngsters coming through. As you guys rightly pointed out, is he going to want to hinder the progress of those guys? Having said that, none of those are necessarily really defensive-minded midfielders, are they? Carroll likes going forward and scoring a goal. Bentaleb, Ricky, you've pointed out, isn't a dedicated defensive midfielder. So it might well be that he decides to. It's going to be an interesting one, as always. On the subject of outgoings, guys, seen today a couple of rumours that Fazio linked with Seville, Watford again for Townsend, looks like it might happen, Pritchard to Norwich. So, Jace, it looks as if your friend Fazio might be off to sunny Spain.
Let's hope so. But, obviously the thing, if Fazio disappears, you've still got to make sure you've got enough cover at the back yourselves. And I suppose he may well say, well, I can move Eric Dyer back, but after his comments last week. I'm not so sure he really now wants to move Eric Dyer back in as a central defender rather than the position he's in. I haven't seen the Pritchard. Is that supposed to be a loan deal or a actual sale?
Yeah, I
Pritchard
believe
to
it's a
Norwich.
loan deal from
Right.
coming out today. I believe it's still in Pochettino's plans from what I've read, so it looks
Yeah.
it might be a loan.
Yeah, well, that would make sense to give him a chance now to get proper fitness back. And it wouldn't surprise me if one or two of the others go out on loan. You might see Ononamar go out on loan. You might see Harry Winks go out on loan as well. But Townsend will be interesting, isn't it? Because if he doesn't play against Leicester, or he doesn't feature against Leicester even on the bench, then for sure his career is totally finished. Because obviously then they don't want to cup tie him as well to see his value go down that way.
John, would you be disappointed to see any of those that have been linked leave the club?
No, not really, mate. To tell you the truth, I was going to try and jump in if you didn't give me a chance there. What I wanted to say was, as far as this defensive midfielder option goes, I don't think we'll spend any money on a defensive midfielder purely because I think it all hinges on the sale of Fazio. And what I mean by that is, if Fazio is to go and we need another fourth choice central defender, I would be massively surprised if Milos Velkovic doesn't get promoted from the under-21s, because he can play. He's been playing at centre half with Cameron Carter-Vickers for the 21s, but he's also a very accomplished defensive midfielder. And I think if Fazio was to leave the club, it would open up a space for him, and he would be there just in case anything happened to Dyer, as well as if anything happened to Wimmer or one of the other centre halves. With the players going out, I think that would be a great move for Pritchard to get some Premier League experience after a great season he had at Brentford last year. Townsend, the writing's been on the wall really since that Aston Villa game with the bust-up after the match, I think. And yeah, Fazio's just, I mean, for the sake of his own career, I mean, I'm not a hater of Fazio. I think he done all right for us last season, really. It was either him or Kirikes playing, wasn't it? And I'd rather Fazio did play. But no, I wouldn't be upset or surprised to see any of them moves happen, to tell you the truth.
We wait and see. It's going to be busy, as always. I just hope, as we mentioned previously, that we get the business done early. You'd hope so.
Well, I just think I can't see us spending a massive amount of money this window, and we do need a striker more than we need anything else, in my opinion. Yeah. But also, we keep saying about, as Ricky said, with the left back there with Davies, where he's playing so well, he's not being dropped. I think that's also the thing with Kane. I think he's not playing just because he's our only striker. He has played well, I think, in more or less every single game this season. You can't say that he's had a game where you'd definitely say, oh, he needs dropping. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if that was the case, and I think that's why we will bring in someone like Berahino who can tick a few different boxes in terms of positions that he can play. I think, everyone keeps saying, we need an out-and-out centre forward. Well, if that was the case, we would have signed Charlie Austin. So I don't think that, possibly Charlie Austin. I don't think Pochettino's really after that kind of player, and I don't think we'll end up with that kind of player. No. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if Berahino is still the one. And as far as his attitude goes, I can't see it being too much of a problem. We don't know what any of our players are like off the pitch. So as long as they behave and they train well, I don't really care what they use their Twitter account for. As long as they're doing the business on the pitch for Spurs, let's hope that it does happen. It'd be nice to get someone in before at least, one of the two Leicester games, that's for sure. And hopefully they'll hit the ground running, whoever it is that comes in.
Absolutely. I saw today a tweet from, I think it was a well-respected journalist that said that West Brom would certainly not accept any less than 25 million, that it made their views clear to Spurs and that there wouldn't be any penny pinching involved, which made me chuckle, bearing in mind Levy's track record. So I just hope that if we do go in for him, we're serious.
This can't drag on any longer, can it? Because if we don't finish in the top four come May, he's going to get absolutely crucified. At least if he does spend out, he can say, well, we had a go, and hopefully it'll work out. But
very quickly, Rick, if you don't mind, mate, just to jump in there. John, you mentioned he'd be crucified if we don't get top four. When you think back to the start of the season, I was sort of asking the question, will we finish top four? Is it realistic? And we all pretty much agreed it wasn't realistic for this season. So will he still get crucified, bearing in mind that we didn't even expect it at the start of the season?
Well, I just think that just goes to show how quickly things can change in football.
Yeah,
I mean, 6 months later, we are saying, you asked the question last week, would it be gutted if we didn't? I think as each game goes on and we're still not losing, we've still only lost 2 in the league. I think as long as that statistic stays the same or similar, the chance of us getting in the top 4 obviously goes up as the amount of games to come decreases. But I just think because I mean, that is the one position still glaringly obvious, isn't it, to everyone, that we do need to strengthen up front. All I'm saying is, if he doesn't strengthen that one position, like if he was to go and spend 50 million on a midfielder and we didn't, I think it'd be a little bit different. But if we don't sign a striker and Harry gets crocked, then he will, because, you know, as we've said week after week, this is a great opportunity we need to seize upon in terms of cementing our place up there. And, you know, as we've already said, Harry did look tired after 70 minutes on Sunday, and he does need some support up there. But, yeah, I mean, I'll stick by what I said there. I think he would get crucified if he doesn't sign a striker, but that would be the only one position, really, that you could say that to, I think.
Sure. Yeah, Rick, sorry to jump in there.
What I was just going to say quickly on this Berahino thing, like you said, Andy, it's bringing a lot of different opinion to the table whether he's worth the hassle. I think what we need to bear in mind is that if he is the player that Pochettino wants, Pochettino will have a meeting hopefully with the player before he signs, and he will lay out to him what he expects from him in terms of his professionalism, in terms of his attitude, in terms of what he expects of the player. Now, I don't think Spurs have lightly gone about the research of the kid in terms of what he brings to the team. In the summer you saw, we made numerous attempts to try and sign him. So there's definitely, I think, still an interest in the player. What I wanted to try and say is that also with West Brom is that there seems to be a keen interest in them with Townsend. So there's possibly a deal to be done there. I think we all agree that although, like John has just said, 25 million, it's not his money. 25 million does sound excessive for a player that's only started twice this season for West Brom. Hasn't done that great, but I think we all know that realistically his head was at Spurs in the summer. And if you said to me, if there's a manager I think that could possibly tame him, I would say it's Pochettino. But I think we need to just relay to the fans of Spurs that are worried about Berahino that, listen, any player coming through that door has been researched by Mitchell and Pochettino personally, and they wouldn't bring any player in to, you know, disrupt the fantastic spirit we've got in the squad at the moment. You know, I think Kyle Walker come out and said this week, at the moment, this is arguably the best team spirit he's ever experienced at Spurs, and that's when you think back to the days when we had, you know, the Bales, the Modric's, the Van der Vaart, and let's be honest, in terms of maybe individuals, we haven't got that kind of quality, but as a team, I think we're just as good, if not better. So the last thing Pochettino will want to do is upset team morale. So I think if he's bringing Berahino in, it's because he believes it's in the best interest of the football club, and he believes he can tame the player. And we've got to support it as a whole.
He's been quite vocal as well, hasn't he, Pochettino, in saying that it's the right type of personality and it's got to match the group and things like that. So he's almost preempting the kind of criticism he may be up against when people say, yeah, but Berahino's thrown a wobbly at West Brom, why are you bringing in? And I think it's Pochettino's way of saying, look, you know, whatever's happening at West Brom is happening at West Brom, but I don't think that, you know, I just don't see the same problems for him here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope so, and let's hope it does work out. And if you're listening, Mr. Levy, please don't put in an offer 50p under the 25 million. You know, please don't mess this one around. I mean, we're in such a great position. None of us would have expected to have been in the top four at this stage of the season. We all remember the lead that Harry lost in his season at Spurs. We haven't got that lead yet, but we're in that top four now, and we're in with a great shout. So let's move on, push on. Don't forget, guys, you can get in touch with the e-Spurs Talking Point each week. Use the hashtag eSpursTP on Twitter, on Facebook, and leave your comments below the subject which is posted on our social media. Listen, lads, it's been a pleasure having you on. Andrew and Brendan from Harvard Spurs there, guys. Keep flying the flag over there. Let's hope some great moments for you guys to get involved in with Spurs in the future. And of course to the three men who make this show possible every week, to Jason, Ricky and John. Thanks for coming on as always, fellas. We've come to you tonight from 4 different time zones, so if there have been any drops in the call or interference on the line, I'm sure you'll understand that. We do our best every week to bring you a show. And I should say also thanks again for the great comments which have been sent to us on Twitter, on Facebook. I know the lads have responded to as many as we can of those, and we all really appreciate those. So please keep leaving them if you feel you enjoy the show. It's much appreciated. We'll be back after the Leicester games, plural, next week. All that leaves me to say is, guys, have a great week, and as always, come on you Spurs.
We're gonna bring the cup back home to White Hart.